Welcome, and thank you everybody for joining us today. We have people calling in from all over the world, as well as fellow Opportunity International board members, ambassador council members, and governors. Today will be informative. Thank you for your valuable time and energy. It's much appreciated. I am MUFFY MACMILLAN, Opportunities Global Ambassador for Women and Girls. I also serve as a director on the board for Opportunity International. I'm so honored to join everybody today to discuss a topic that means a great deal to me personally, to help drive change around social justice. Upholding social justice means valuing the rights of all individuals, especially women and girls. In order to champion change and create a more equal world for all, we must break down the barriers that many girls face every day. Women and girls are the most impactful catalysts for change that we have. When girls are able to attend a good school, they live longer, they have healthier lives, they marry later, they have fewer children, and drastically increase their future income. When women are empowered to work in the formal economy, national GDPs rise. The family's income gets reinvested back into their children. Within their communities, women become advocates for health, wellness, and safety within their neighborhoods. And they have a chance to break the cycle of poverty forever. Women and girls are the greatest untapped resource in the world. My many trips overseas with Opportunity International gave me firsthand experiences around these issues. And I'd like to take just a moment to tell you a personal story about me visiting India. And I went to the poorest state in India, and it was in one of the poorest regions of the world, Bihar, India. It changed my life. These women were sitting on the floor, maybe 10 of them, in a group, and we were at this place called Healing Fields. And as they sat on the floor and you looked around, these are women that would start to tell their stories about how they would go out into the fields at 7 in the morning and come home at 9 o'clock at night. Due to their customs and all the things that they were facing around sanitation, personal hygiene, they would not go to the bathroom, so they wouldn't drink water. If you go out and work in the fields all day and don't drink water and you're pregnant, you can imagine what happens. So we were there trying to have them develop, buy, and have a toilet. Now, let me tell you, the toilet was a bucket in the ground. It's not a toilet like we think about in our country. When they got the money to do this, they wanted to feed their children. And do you blame them? I mean, so they would get the money. So hygiene was a real problem. And we sat and spent quite a bit of time helping them, explaining, educating them. And what I have to say is that there was this woman in the back of the room with tears in her eyes. She raised her hand, and it almost brings tears to my eyes, and said, "Thank you for giving us dignity and self-respect. If that doesn't change your life, nothing will." Anyway, working with our clients is a critical role we play. We're honored to hear today from the people who are working on the front lines every day. RENÉE MCALPIN is from our education quality team. Dana LUNBERRY is from our digital financial service team. Mary Pat McKay is from our knowledge management team. And our fearless leader and CEO, ATUL TANDON, who traveled with 13 women warriors to India and is still lived to tell about it. Q&A will follow our conversation. And if you want to ask a question during the call, just click on your chat button at the bottom of your screen and then type in your question, or just type, "I have a question," and we will call on you live during the Q&A. Now, what's the most important time is to turn to our panelists and hear from our panelists. RENÉE, let's start with you. as the manager of our EduQuality program, your focus is on the schools that have now been closed around the world for months since COVID-19 hit. Tell us specifically how the pandemic has impacted female school proprietors and students.
Thank you so much, MUFFY. Really happy to share our story and to share the work that we're doing in the field. My name's RENÉE MACMILLAN. As you mentioned, I'm the manager of the EduQuality program, which works to support school leaders and teachers in 1,700 schools in 8 countries across Latin America, Africa, and South Asia. So before COVID-19, so pre-March 2020, when we saw school closures, cascade across the world, we had made tremendous progress in the education sector. Over the last 10 to 20 years, we've seen more children in school having access to education than we've seen in the history of formal education. And we had massive momentum behind us. We saw increased enrollment for girls at the primary level. In some countries, we saw greater numbers of girls enrolled than we see boys. There was still a lot of work to be done, which is why we do what we do. A lot of work to be done on the transition of girls from primary to secondary school, a lot of work to be done on completion of secondary school for girls and livelihoods. And that was the work that we were doing, which was immensely important, and also focusing on not only access to education, but making sure all those children who were now getting education for the very first time were actually learning when they're going to school. So a lot of the work that we do with training school leaders, training teachers, and supporting them and improving the quality of their institutions was the main piece of our work. And then COVID-19 happened, which everyone has experienced to some extent, everyone on this call has. And it has been significantly more acute for those who were vulnerable before COVID-19, and those are a lot of our partners and then the schools that we work with in low and middle income countries. So what we saw was a double shock to the system. So not only prolonged school closures, but also a global economic downturn and crisis. And this affected the schools we work with as a double-edged sword. And so what we've seen and what we know is going to be the continued impact on girls, and what we know from previous crises that we've seen historically is that the longer girls stay out of school, the less likely they will go back. And that is devastating considering the progress that we made before COVID. Some of the World Bank and the United Nations estimates have put us at 10 to 15 million children who will not go back. And the reason why girls are so vulnerable to this is because early adolescent pregnancy, they're greater risk of adolescent pregnancy, greater risk of being married off when a family has to decide, who they're going to feed, and they have a choice of marrying their daughter off so that she could potentially have better opportunities. I wouldn't want anyone to be faced with that choice. There is a greater chance that girls will not go back to school. Because when families have lost their income and lost their livelihoods because of COVID, they have less income to contribute towards school fees. And so usually they'll choose the son, the boy, to go back. And so that is what we're faced right now. It is affecting everyone, and it's going to affect those who are at greater risk, but those who are vulnerable are going to have greater risks as long as schools remain closed. And that could be another 4 to 5 months in many of the countries where we operate.
The next question I'd like to ask you, RENÉE, is what is Opportunity's core model for ensuring that girls get into and stay in good schools? And how has that been adapted under the current circumstances?
Yeah, and so if we go back to March, I think it was about March 14th to March 16th, when we saw school closures cascade across every single country where we operate. It literally felt like overnight. And we activated our team immediately to determine where we have the greatest value add and how we can continue to support our partner schools weather this storm. And we knew that there's going to be 2 main obstacles keeping these schools from permanently closing due to prolonged school closures mandated by government, and making sure that kids return to school. And from what we know, as I mentioned, there's a very large risk that significant amount of children will not return, and that's particularly for girls. So the work that we did was immediately mobilizing all of our relationships and connections that we had built over the years of doing this work to immediately support school leaders and teachers. And so what that means particularly for girls is all of the challenges that I just mentioned that will be particularly acute for them. School leaders and teachers need to be sensitized to this, and they need to know that have the tools, and they need to understand how to mobilize girls and get them back into school, how to engage communities for child protection. So, engaging with teachers and parents and other community members on how to protect girls, how to keep them focused on their study, and how to get them back into school. And the only way we can do this, especially in a time of social distancing, is using all of the channels that we've developed and all the relationships that we have developed over this time, and the trust that we've built to engage, to sensitize, and to raise the alarm as to the impact that this will have. So engaging school leaders and sensitizing them, and then also preparing for the recovery period. So as we like to say, building back better. And moving forward. So when schools do reopen, we have to hit the ground running. We have to mobilize the children, particularly the girls, the female school leaders, the female teachers who represent a safe place within the school and also are models for what girl children can become, and make sure that they go back to school and they support girls and all children return safely when schools do reopen. So, big part of what we've been doing was leveraging our relationships, sensitization of school leaders and teachers about the risks that girls are faced during prolonged school closures, and committing and showing the school leaders that we are here in the long run, because the recovery will take a long time. And myself am personally committed to that, and so is Opportunity.
Renee, that was excellent. Thank you so much. Dana comes to us from our digital program. Would you share with us, Dana, some of the ways we are bridging the gender gap in digital financial services?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Muffy. So hi, everyone. I'm Dana LUNBERRY. I'm delighted to share with you about a topic that I'm very passionate about, which is really about the potential of digital technologies to advance financial inclusion globally. And it's exciting work. It's about removing various barriers that exist that disproportionately affect women. I've been working on digital teams at Opportunity International for the past 10 years, and so far this has certainly been the most exciting year already. So let me start with the definition. So the gender gap in digital financial services. So what is that? Well, it refers to the lack of access that many women experience when it comes to obtaining financial services through digital channels like cell phone banking, online banking, and ATMs. More women than men don't have access to a cell phone, and they are generally less experienced with technologies. In low and middle income countries, nearly 200 million fewer women than men own a cell phone. And what this means for financial services is that many women around the world are not able to benefit from the types of banking services that are already available, which would help them carry out banking on their phone instead of traveling to a bank branch. Like the experiences that many of us on this call share together, more and more Opportunity clients don't have to step into a banking hall, but they can really just use their phone to check their account balance and conduct basic transactions. And this includes clients with smartphones and basic phones without internet connectivity, because we've developed and we're continuing to develop technology that's right for our clients. So during this COVID crisis, where people are experiencing lockdown and limited mobility, digital tools have become more helpful than ever before. It means that the relationship with clients can stay strong, and that clients can obtain the services that they need and when they need them, which can help them be more independent, tap into their savings for emergencies, better provide for their families, and keep their businesses afloat. Digital can be the key to success for women, yet still so many women aren't able to use it. So if we go underneath the surface, we found that many women clients and often staff view technologies as something that men do, right? And that women in general are more reluctant to try. We have a senior member of staff in Uganda, just as an example, who is highly educated, yet she kept her ATM card in her purse for over a month before she felt confident enough to start using it. So if we just consider for a moment how much more difficult it might be for a woman who has had little education and little exposure to technology, she may feel a sense of shame or even guilt for taking someone else's time to ask for help. We've heard women say, it's my fault for not knowing. I shouldn't be taking my officer's time to explain this to me. So those are the types of barriers that we're working to remove through our program. And that's why Opportunity has a robust digital financial services program that focuses on women, because women have been largely excluded from the digital economy in many countries. We're in an age where we no longer have clients coming to the banking hall, but it's about bringing services to the client in the comfort of their own homes and their workplaces, and making sure that they have what they need and those services available to them 24/7. So naturally, our program looks different in different countries depending on the local context. So in India, for instance, we're setting up women as small business owners. These women are bank agents who can serve their local communities and ensure that women in their neighborhood know about and have access to financial services. Many women in rural India don't own their own phone, since cell phones are often viewed as a husband's property within rural communities where we're working. And through our program, we've seen great success in empowering women as agents, which has caused a shift in thinking for both clients and institutions as people are becoming more open to this idea that women are providers of financial services and they are people who are digitally savvy. And if we go to sub-Saharan Africa, we have programs that are addressing other issues. So in sub-Saharan Africa, many women have their own phones, but often don't feel comfortable trying out digital financial services. So we're piloting other types of innovations. So for example, we've begun to test voice-based messaging in local languages to share information about how clients can use cell phone banking and how they can get assistance from nearby agents while keeping their money private and safe, which is especially important for women who have few resources. Just recently, we launched 3 new projects in Ghana and Uganda to respond to the COVID-19 crisis, to ensure clients are informed and equipped and to keep their families safe in this difficult time. It's through our messaging we're helping to address pertinent issues that have arisen because of COVID-19, such as the surge in domestic violence and the added burden that many women are taking on as caregivers during this crisis. So alongside our various country initiatives, some of which I just mentioned, we've also developed a 10-week training course to help staff in Asia and Africa become aware of the barriers that many women face. And we provided toolkits for tackling these various barriers. As a result, more women staff are becoming leaders and champions of digital and are taking on more responsibilities and are on track for promotion. And just as importantly, if not more women clients are adopting digital services and are improving their access to digital services, to financial services, because more women staff and agents are proactively offering to them digital financial services alongside both training and encouragement. So I'd love to share more about our program, but let me hold off for now and we can always continue the discussion if there's any questions during the Q&A.
Dana, thank you. Your work is making a huge difference. Thank you for what you and your team do. You know, I personally witnessed women in India and witnessed this and really saw what a difference it can make for women to bank from their phones. Using biometric identification when they can't read or write, I know what you're doing is critical, having experienced it. Mary Pat, I understand you work closely with women farmers in Africa. We would love to learn more about what makes your work with women farmers unique from our traditional ag finance services.
Sure. Thank you so much. It's really great to be here, everyone. Hello. I'm a researcher and trainer, and I've been working in microenterprise development in Africa for 30 years, and the last 5 with Opportunity. And I always love a chance to share about this work in Mozambique, because I have a personal spiritual connection to the leaders and the communities that we serve there, having worked with them since I joined Opportunity 5 years ago. So we are in the 5th year of this program that I'll talk about. And this program empowers women by linking them to a comprehensive package of agricultural support and also giving them access to commercial agricultural markets, with the end goal of helping them increase their income and also their autonomy. The program operates in an underserved area of a very poor country. It's in central Mozambique, which was absolutely devastated by an unprecedented cyclone in 2019. In this context, we identify and strengthen community-based entrepreneurs who we call farm business advisors, or FBAs. They sell inputs like certified seeds to farmers. They offer training, and they also help get crops to market. So they're kind of a last mile, one-stop agricultural shop. One lesson we've learned with this model during these crises is that this kind of network provides a very resilient infrastructure for reaching people impacted by crisis. The program itself addresses multiple challenges faced by women in this part of Africa with different interventions, customized to the context and sometimes the individual. So I'll just take you through one client, and you can kind of see how the program works and how it plays out from her vantage point. So I'll talk about Edna. She and her husband farm maize, garlic, and potatoes on a small farm. It's about 2 acres. Edna's husband used to make all the decisions about the farm and the income. As is typical in this area, Edna does not have direct access to land to farm on for herself. So to earn her own money that she has control of, she would harvest seeds from the family farm, and she sold them by the teaspoon to her neighbors. So micro business. But the program recognized her entrepreneurship, her get up and go, and also the leadership she was showing by communicating with other women farmers in the area. So she was recruited and trained as a farm business advisor to serve these other farmers like herself. So she is now a trusted source for other women farmers in her community. Women don't often have the education, the freedom of movement, the access to information, or even confidence to like shop around in the market for different kinds of support and choose the right input supplier or negotiate a good deal with the buyer. And they're also vulnerable to exploitation from commercial male service providers. So the program strategy of equipping female or gender-sensitive male FBAs to provide this kind of comprehensive package of support to women farmers, that's how we address the kind of barriers that isolated women farmers face. Another big challenge is that women like Edna often don't have the autonomy to make decisions about their farms, or they work on their husband's farms as kind of unpaid laborers. So Opportunities training for these FBAs includes tools and techniques for what we call family farm management. And what that means is we emphasize that every family member that's involved in the farm, the husband, the wife or wives, and even the older children that work on the farms, they should all work together to make the farm successful. And what that requires is that everyone share what their hopes and dreams are, and they get an opportunity to make decisions about how the farm is run, and especially how the income from the farm is distributed. So it's a kind of business approach that ends up being very empowering for the family members and for the men as well. Opportunity has helped Edna grow from this occasional seed seller to being this community agribusiness leader in a very short period of time. And with the income earned from serving more farmers in her community, she and her husband purchased 2 cows, and they started using mobile money to save. And this ended up being very important when the cyclone hit. Edna's farm and business were destroyed. But they were able to use the capacity that was built by the program, as well as some additional emergency support from Opportunity to recover, and then in turn to help their community recover. And that beautiful story is kind of what I witnessed in January when I visited in early 2020.
Mary Pat, please tell us how COVID is restricting the work of the women farmers in Africa.
Yeah, so right, then came COVID. So this is what Edna said about it. She said, and I quote, "This COVID-19 is even worse than the cyclone. Cyclone Day came one day and left the following day. COVID-19 is different. It comes as a slow torture." So our first response to this disaster was to disseminate health education and equipment because this area, as I mentioned, is so underserved. So we just took the Ministry of Health Education and we bought these buckets that have kind of faucets on the end of them so people can wash their hands, and we distributed that, and we trained people in social distancing, you know, all the basics. So to protect herself and her family, Edna put this bucket of water and soap out for her farmer suppliers to use when they deliver their produce or pick up their seeds. And this is what she says about it. "Obviously, there are people who choose not to listen." Well, we know that story. So she says, "Now I am not just a buyer. I have also become a preacher, giving a sermon on sanitizing, washing, masking, etc. But thanks to Opportunity, I'm well positioned to serve my fellow producers in my community." So again, she is this kind of one-stop shop for help in the community. Yeah, there's the example. Now that's the big one that's used when we do training, and there's a smaller one that we distribute for household use for the FBAs. Since then, the program staff have responded to the pandemic's economic challenges, and we've continued to strengthen this community response infrastructure. So one thing that happened is that although agriculture and food are obviously essential industries, at the local level, this main message got sent down in many African countries, including Mozambique, of like, stay home. And in practice, it meant the authorities shut down many markets and agribusinesses. In some areas affected by the cyclone, people felt guilty for not following the government's advice to evacuate their area during the cyclone, and as a result, they lost loved ones. And so when the authorities told them to stay home, some people didn't even go from their house to their farms, you know, even though they wouldn't be in contact with anybody. So you can just kind of picture the lack of awareness and education and lack of information. And women were more affected by this because they more commonly trade locally and informally, and because they're more vulnerable to and frightened of local authorities and have less access to information. So one of the key things we did is that we helped the FBAs to advocate, and also we conducted direct advocacy with local authorities to allow the farmers to go to their farms and allow the traders to market inputs and crops using safe protocols. Now it's, you know, the ag markets are kind of open where we're working now in ways that they weren't for like the first month of the pandemic. And then in terms of the infrastructure to keep the training and communication flowing during the pandemic, we're equipping the FBAs with smartphones and solar chargers, and we're translating videos into local languages. Again, this is especially relevant for women who, if they do have a phone, as Dana said, they're more likely to have a simple phone. And because of low literacy, women in this area need training in local languages, not the national language of Portuguese. So with this infrastructure, isolated FBAs can be more in touch with one another and with staff on a number of issues, including things like domestic violence that Dana raised, as well as programmatic issues. And the program can easily flex this way between in-person and remote engagement, depending on their level of restrictions, assuming that they're going to ebb and flow over time. I've really appreciated being in remote touch with the program staff and through them, the FBAs. At Opportunity, you know, in 2019, we were all praying for Central Mozambique and for our leaders in our communities when they were hit by the cyclone. And then when the pandemic hit the US so hard, I got so many messages from them and others all over Africa praying for us. And it's just such a beautiful connection. And I'm so grateful to Opportunity for the chance to fulfill my calling in this beautiful way.
Mary Pat, what an inspirational story. Edna's a hero. Thank you for sharing your story. And, you know, I look at it also the same way. As the clients pray for us, it really is a full circle of us also praying for them. They have so little, but their faith gives them happiness in more ways than any of us can imagine. ATUL, we want to hear from you. Can you tell us why are our efforts to serve women and girls of particular interest to you?
Thanks, MUFFY. And before I do, thanks again for hosting this webinar, and thank you so much for, frankly, the initiative that you took to draw attention to the cause of women and girls and taking on the role of our global ambassador. So I'm truly grateful. And I have to say that traveling with the 13 women warriors, if you will, was a sheer pleasure. So thank you so much. And I continue to, after now almost 2 years, to be friends with that group. So it's really been, you all have been a real gift to me, even in the time of now lockdowns and being at home. So thank you so much. And we could spend the rest of the time talking about the women warriors and a man's view into that world. I think I should write a book about that, MUFFY, sometime.
I agree too. I think everybody ought to ask you questions.
In answer to your question, let me take a step back and really look at two perspectives as to answer why we do what we do at Opportunity. And the context of it is both the success that humankind has had in addressing the needs of women and girls who are typically at the bottom and have been for generations and generations at the bottom of the social and economic pyramid in country after country. And so, we should, and rightly so, celebrate the successes we've had. In 1972, 69% of the girl children even finished primary school. Today, 90%, 90% do. In some countries now, when it comes to secondary, even college education, the number of girl children exceeds that of boys. So we are seeing that. Childhood mortality, and we could spend a lot of time talking about childhood mortality, especially in my home country of India. But children not surviving past their 5th birthdays, it's an incredible indicator of the progress of women, especially mothers, is that, it's currently that number of childhood mortality, and principally it is the girls, remember, when we talk about childhood mortality, for some of the reasons that my colleagues already mentioned. Today, that number is under 4% of children not surviving past their 5th birthday. When I started working in this field in the late 90s, early 2000s, that number was 20%, 1 in 5. Now that is down to 4%, right? Now, when we talk about financial inclusion, the largest increase in the number of people who are the 2 billion odd who are now financially included has been in women. But that being said, the challenges remain, and the challenges are very real. Today, 70%, I mean, we've made great progress in addressing economic poverty. Instead of having about 2 billion people living under $2 a day or $1 a day when we started, this was in record keeping in 1992. We are now down to somewhere about 700 million people, right? Sadly, because of COVID-19, we'll add, for the first time since record keeping began, 100 million people back on to that scoreboard. It's a tremendous setback, tremendous setback. Within those numbers is hidden a brutal fact. 70%, 70% of those 700 million people who are living on less than $2 a day are women and girls. So that's why we do what we do at Opportunity, is focus on women and girls, MUFFY. And and I really am, some ways, proud of our history of now 50 years. You know, we currently have our 17 million clients across the world, somewhere between 85 to 88% of women. Right, the challenge that they faced on no bank accounts to save money, we started setting up banks around the world, and you know, in country after country, social banks to provide savings bank account services. Today, one of the largest providers even in India of savings bank account services is our network, our affiliates. They had no money and resources to stand on their own 2 feet to earn a livelihood. Opportunity started giving microloans, you know, first individually, then in trust groups, and now continues to, both in trust groups and individually. As you heard, Dana, increasingly now digitally oriented and managed. In addition to loans, we started giving, we provide training and support services, right? Defense against natural catastrophes. Opportunity introduced microinsurance, the world's largest microinsurance enterprise. Microinsure was an Opportunity startup, now independent. Limited access to education. You heard, you know, what you just heard what Renee had to say about our focus on education. So, you know, as I think about all these things and what Opportunity does, agricultural finance, you know, our principal clients in agricultural finance are women. We did a survey in Mozambique, and of our women farmers, and Mary Pat will probably correct me here, but from what I recall, approximately 80% of the women said not only had their income increased, but their standing in their family, their ability to have decision rights and opportunity to respect in the family had increased. So that's what MUFFY drives us, is that we talk about the means, giving them the means to stand on their own 2 feet, because they don't have that. The savings accounts, the loans, the ability to run a small micro business, for the girl children to get educated. What it translates into is not only increased livelihood, but frankly, increased well-being across the board. And I do believe that when the mothers and the children prosper, the family prospers, and the men prosper. Because in our models, we never leave out the husbands. They are a full part and integrated into all of our processes. So we believe the family as a unit has to rise up. But for us, the focus is on, you know, when you educate a woman, educate a girl, and get a woman, a mother to thrive, a village thrives. So MUFFY, if I have a bit of time, I want to reflect on this from a personal perspective. Is, you know, my own story, and you heard this before, is growing up with not very much in India. You know, and I still remember this as yesterday. Through my elementary to my high school years, my mother, it was always my mother, had a gift for me at the beginning of the school year. And it was the only gift she would ever give me, given where we sat and what we were able to afford, was a box of number 2 lead pencils. So MUFFY, I have, this is not exactly, it's a paper mate, but the color matches, right? This is pretty much the pencil that my mom gave. It wasn't self-propelled, by the way. If I had to use a sharpener. I don't know if many of you even know what a sharpener is. There were 12 lead pencils. And that was pretty much all that I was going to have for the whole year. And I still remember those gifts, MUFFY, because those pencils represented not only a opportunity for me to do better, but frankly, an expectation, if not a demand from my mother to do better. She's the one who supported me. She's the one who undergirded me. She's the one who expected the best from her children. Both my brother and I, he went on to become a very senior executive at the World Bank and is now retired, and I'm here with you. And I have to say that that beginning and the reason for that was my mom. So the reason I do what I do is that I've seen in my own life what happens when a woman is educated. She was the first one in her family's multi-generation family, going back many hundreds of years, if not thousands, to have a college education. She was a school teacher, a primary school teacher at a little school across from our home. And she's the one who invested herself in her children. So when you educate a woman, when you let her stand on her own 2 feet, and you give her the opportunity to invest in her own children, not only does she thrive, but her children thrive. So that's why I know my colleagues, everyone on this team, on the panel, and our staff around the world joined me in that very visceral and very personally felt, for us, call to work with women and children. So that's why we do what we do, MUFFY. So thank you for asking. And if you don't mind, I'll go off video for a while.
Atul, thank you for sharing such a personal story. And I love seeing the yellow pencil. Atul always reminds us of what's important about Opportunity's good work. Thank you again, Atul. It's so hard for many of us not to be able to meet with clients and staff now. And being with each of you, Renee, Dana, Mary Pat, makes us feel that much closer to the work. Thank you again for sharing the insights from the field. It's now time for Q&A, so I will turn it over to Opportunity's Marketing Manager, Katie Morgan, to facilitate this section.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here with you today virtually. Thank you so much for joining us on this call. I hope you are finding it as insightful and inspiring as I am. And judging from the questions that we've had flowing in from different sources, it seems like you are very engaged. So I'm going to start off with a question for Renee. Renee, the question is, as we look toward reopening schools globally, are the hurdles the same for Opportunity school leaders as they are for school leaders in the US?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I would say yes and no. One thing that has been incredibly valuable, I think, for myself and the team of 40 education specialists and content developers in the field supporting our school leaders right now has been learning from what others are doing well and from what hasn't been done well, looking at you know, the school closures and how it's affected almost every country in the world, except maybe I think Belarus is one of the only countries that did not close schools. And we've learned a lot. And I think from a personal perspective, I think the biggest challenge that school leaders are faced with right now is not only the anxiety of their own children's education, but then the anxiety of dealing with the education of all of the children that are attending their schools and how to manage that effectively with all the complexities. School closures, everyone is dealing with how to do it safely. They know school is important. Everyone who is an educator is doing it because they have a commitment to their communities, and they're there because they want to serve the future of their societies. And this is put it at a particularly extreme personal risk and risk of their communities on how to reopen properly. And every school leader is facing that, from the US to Uganda to India. So how do you balance that personal safety and your personal family with that of the commitment you've made to your communities and your schools to do that effectively? You know, one of the other challenges that school leaders are faced with right now is how to support their teachers also to effectively not only serve the spectrum of students that they work with, from the most vulnerable, you know, students with special needs to girls, but also thinking about how to catch up in terms of learning and what has been missed, and the massive learning loss that's happened during school closures, and the widening equality gaps that have arisen. And we know that that's present in the United States. We know it's present in Uganda. We know it's present across all the countries where we work in, and trying to do that effectively in so much uncertainty has really been consistent across the world.
I think you make a lot of good points there. Thank you very much for your answer. So our next question is for Dana, but first I want to remind everyone that if you do have questions, feel free to put them in the chat, or if you'd like to ask live instead of me reading, you can always just say, I have a question, and we'll unmute you when it's your turn to go. So feel free to keep the questions coming. So Dana, can you tell us a little bit more about how the female agents you mentioned in your earlier discussion from India, how do those agents work with trust groups?
Yeah, absolutely. So these women who are agents, they're typically married women. They're living often with their husbands and their husbands' families, so their in-laws, in this joint family household situation. And they serve the full community. They often are very ambitious because they're wanting to start their own businesses, and they end up, serving everyone in the community, which includes lots of what they call self-help groups in India, which are groups of women that form this trust group that are working with either a bank or a local microfinance institution. And they would often help other women in terms of repaying their loans, helping them check what's on their balance in their accounts, send money if they need to do funds transfers digitally, things like that. So that's the relationship that these women agents would have with both the general public, but specifically with trust group members.
Awesome, and I put a few photos up there for everyone to see while Dana, you were talking. Thank you so much for that information. Now, Atul, we have a question for you from Dale. It says, Renee mentioned that opportunity is a long-term partner. What can we on this call do to ensure that opportunity is there for our clients during the long haul?
Thank you so much. Well, I think what I would say is to continue to do what you have done for so many years, which is to stand with the poor and stand with us with the opportunity. And I think that standing, if you will, has been, especially for this group, has been manifold in terms of your time. Several of you have served on our boards, both here in the US and around the world, on the board committees. You are involved in our volunteer groups, our board of governors and ambassador councils. So that would be number one. Your time and your talent. Of course, your treasures, continued giving. Because as you will look at, even when we look at giving, the amount of money that really leaves America to serve the poorer outside of the world in terms of our giving is approximately somewhere in the region of 4 to 6% of total giving in America. Right. So when we look at that, it is now I would submit to all of us that the returns on those funds are astronomical. When you look at even the reduction in extreme poverty, the improvement in the number of girl children being educated, livelihoods, water, health, I mean, we can continue down that. So I'd say continued giving to opportunity. Most importantly, to make sure that you keep reminding yourselves and us how important this work is, and we stay true to our mission and our call. Right. As a leader, for me, one of the most important, I would say, that legacy for any leader is an organization that has stayed focused on its mission. One of the things that brought me here to Opportunity was that Opportunity stayed focused on its mission for 50 years. And I think that's pretty rare in the world of nonprofits or of any organization. So help us to stay focused. So that's what how I would respond. But thanks for asking, Dale. And alongside Muffy, of course, Dale serves on the Opportunity US board. So thanks for joining, Carl.
Thank you so much, Atul, and thank you, Dale, for your question. We just have one more. This question is for Mary Pat. When it comes to the need for sanitation, I read that families are having to choose between using water for hand washing or using water for cooking, since water is scarce and hard to access. What did you tell clients in this situation?
The area of water, as Atul has mentioned, it's an expanding area for Opportunity. And I think for what I can say kind of universally across our programs is that we do our best to set ourselves up in ways that are very client responsive. And so if there's a particular issue coming up around water, we try and respond to it. So for example, in Ghana, the government eliminated fees for water. Well, we have a pilot initiative in Ghana where we're financing micro enterprise community-based water selling. So we have businesses that sell water, but suddenly they weren't allowed to charge fees. So we restructure those loans. So rather than sort of closing down those businesses because they don't have income, we try and keep those businesses alive. So that's kind of an example of how we've been trying to pivot. And then we are investing in our capacity around water. The program in Ghana is one example, and then we have this initiative called Opportunity Zones, and water is a key sector in those zones. So that's kind of the short answer. In the particular area in Mozambique where I am, it's a very fertile area, and they are fortunate to have, for the most part, enough water for most seasons. But it's certainly an issue in many places, either in terms of availability or cost.
Thank you so much. All right, so I think that we are going to move back over to MUFFY. We're going to let you close us out. Thank you again for your questions, and hope you guys have a great rest of your day. MUFFY, back to you.
Thank you. This has been a wonderful discussion. I wish we didn't have to close. I could talk on and on, as everybody could. Thank you again to our wonderful guests and ATUL for bringing our community together again in this way. This is such a special group of people. Your commitments to clients and their families is astounding. I would personally like to challenge everyone on this call today to join me and my 13 warrior sisters who set a bold goal of $5 million over a 3-year period. This $5 million will transform the lives of 10,000 families. To date, we've raised almost $2.3 million, which transforms the lives of 4,600 families. Please join me in this incredible work as we change lives on both sides, the clients as well as the donors. For anyone who is interested in donating to support our women and girls work right now, you can do so at opportunity.org/donate. Katie, would you just put that up on the chat box so all of us can link into it? Thank you. I hope all of you and your families continue to stay healthy and take care of each other. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and thanks again.